Welcome to I forget the episode number of the Rain Race podcast. I think we're on 39 or 40. Obviously, joined alongside my good friend Kyle Cuthbertson.
What's up?
We're going to be talking about a race today, a race that I was at. This was the first IMSA race that I had, the first race period that I was able to go to since the 2019 Northeast Grand Prix at Lime Rock for the IMSA Weathertech Championship. First IMSA race with prototypes since 2018 Watkins Glen, and boy, what a race was it to be heading back to. We're going to be talking about the fine details of that race over the next few minutes. Just wanted to make sure everything was looking good with the stream. So, if you're new here, this is obviously a live podcast, pretty unique format. I don't think a lot of people do live podcasts. So if you want to ask some questions, throw them in the chat, and we will try to answer them. And the podcast will be available on podcasting platforms tomorrow or 2 days from now. It depends. I'm sort of a little iffy on that, but it should be out tomorrow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of those fine sources. So today, first things first, 12 Hours of Sebring. As I said, I was there, and I'm going to use Kyle here to sort of fill me in on some of the things that I might have missed on TV. But starting with the results in the race, definitely a surprise winner, I'd say. The number 5 JDC, still kind of weird associating the number 5 car with JDC Miller Motorsports, but they won the race overall over the number 55 Mazda. And if you were actually paying attention to that race, that's very interesting because they came in contact with the 31 Action Express Cadillac with probably 3-ish hours left in the race. I know I was standing over in that area right near turn 1. I was standing at the exit of the pits right when that happened. And we were just out of the plane of view where we weren't able to see that. But I do remember one of my good friends who I was there with, Frankie, pulled up on Instagram and he said, check out what just happened between the number 5 and the 31. So I wasn't really able to see how they could crawl back from that. I wasn't really expecting them to be in the fight at the end because they were off strategy from all the other teams. I kind of thought, all right, well, JDC is up front, but they're going to have to make an extra pit stop, right? And I didn't really know that until the very end when the 01 car had their issues at the end of the race, which we're going to get into in a little bit here. I thought that was a done deal win for the 55 car. And sure enough, the 5 car from JDC was able to pull that one off. Very close, though. Over the 55 Mazda, it was only 1.4 seconds at the line. And then just behind them was the Ally Cadillac Action Express entry of Jimmy Johnson, Kamui Kobayashi, and Simon Pagenaud. Now, that car ultimately did not finish in third place. They actually finished they finished, I believe, 7th in class, I want to say, because of a drive time infringement relating to Simon Pagenaud. I just want to see if I can pull up the confirmation on that. I do believe, yes, it was 7th in class, so it was essentially last in the DPI class behind the 31 Whelen Engineering Action Express Cadillac. Kyle, initial impressions from the DPI race at Sebring, or from the DPI class at Sebring, I should say.
Well, the definitely at the end of the race, you kind of remember that it's a 12-hour race and anything can happen. I think everything did happen. So the 5 car, literally at one point, was in the tire barrier, and that was pretty insane. When I don't was it Nazar or Durrani driving the 31 when they hit the 5?
I want to say it was Nazar, but I'm not quite positive on that.
Either way, they made contact, and the 5 was literally in the tire wall. And to think just a few hours later, they were in the lead of the race. And fun fact that we actually learned after the race from Bourdais was one of the elements, like the main element,
right?
Not the main element, but the element on the rear wing came off in those final laps, which is why he was kind of slowing up. So he was able to maintain the lead through the entire. It was like a 15-minute restart, like dash to the finish through that entire 15 minutes. racing with no help from the rear wing, with the extra element being gone. So it was quite impressive. Very cool to see the JDC team finally have some success. They've had a rough couple of years. Last year was really rough, but yeah, I mean these IMSA races. I can't really remember the last time we had like a really boring IMSA race. It seems like ever since Petite, which was just again insane. I feel like all of the races have just been really good, and it's really awesome to see.
Hopping back to that wing element on the 5 car, it's actually a little bit interesting because the 55 car, I don't know if it was the exact same element, but I know they had an issue with their rear wing at the end of the Rolex 24 this year, which is why they were like looking like huge contenders for the win, and then they sort of fell off and ended up falling behind the 48 car as well. Now, speaking of the 48 car, I believe if they weren't disqualified in this race and they had finished third, I want to say they would be on top of the Michelin Endurance Cup. It would either be them or perhaps the 55. I guess, you know what, they would probably be tied with the 55 because the 48 finished third on track at Sebring, and they finished second on track, or second, I guess, overall at Daytona. And the 55 was third at Daytona and second at Sebring. Now you also have to account for the whole quarter race, the quarter race points that they do for the Endurance Cup. So I don't know exactly how it would have played in, but I remember talking about that with Frankie, how the 48 team sort of unexpectedly is extremely strong during these endurance races. No discredit to their driver lineup, but Jimmy Johnson, this was only his second race in an LMP-based car. And, despite the fact that he is probably what's holding that team back from being a guaranteed race-winning team right now, no discrediting to him or anything. This is, as I said, only his second race. He's definitely putting on a very fair performance in that car. They have 2 more races now still. They still have Watkins Glen, which is a track that Jimmy Johnson is obviously way more familiar with his years in NASCAR, and Road Atlanta at the end of the season. So I wouldn't count them out. If you're a fan of that 48 car, I think that they have the pace, and I've been impressed with what they've been able to pull off this season, especially considering at Sebring, it looked like a nightmare weekend for them at the beginning. In practice, they had a couple of issues. I don't remember exactly what their problems were in practice, but in practice 2, I believe they only ran a few laps. And then in qualifying, if you hadn't seen, Jimmy Johnson ended up spinning the car in turn 16. Claimed he got some dirt or just some rubber or something on the tires. Went into turn 17 that same lap and ended up slamming into the wall. So they ended up having to go to their backup chassis, or their backup tub, for the race the next day. And right from the drop of the green in that race, I was like, they're going to be fighting the biggest uphill battle possible. They got barely any practice laps compared to their competitors. They're on a brand new tub right now that they don't really have any on-track time with, except for the few minutes that they got in the warm-up session. So, yeah, I was impressed by them nonetheless. Certainly they have to figure out that whole drive time issue. It seems like that's catching out even the best of the best in sports car racing over the past few years, but overall, if you're a fan of that car, I wouldn't count them out for the final 2 races of the Endurance Cup. Now, top 3, we already mentioned the 5 and the 55 are the top 2. Third place actually ended up going to the number 60 Meyer Shank Racing Acura. Talk about another surprise performance right there. I think everybody was expecting it to be between the 10 and the 01 again. So, round of applause for the 60 Meyer Shank car for actually getting on the overall podium with the penalty to the 48 car. And now I want to talk about the 01. If you want to talk about who was the surefire shot to win that race in the final stages, it was the 01 car. And while I can't tell you that much, because when you're at the track you actually see less of what's going on than if you're watching it on TV, where you can pull up timing and see the sector times for everybody as it's happening, you could tell the 01 car was checking out at the finish in the hands of Scott Dixon, and ended up making contact with the number 25 BMW. That BMW is going to come and play again when we talk about GTLM, but for now, Yeah. Was the 01 car actually trying to pit? Because that's what I haven't been able to find out.
Yes, I
Okay.
believe they were.
All right. Because I couldn't tell. I had seen the onboard as it had happened. Somebody happened to be. I was over in turn number 5 when that happened, trying to get photos of the Mercedes sparking, because that's probably the best place to get that. And walked over to somebody's RV. He happened to have a TV set up outside, and I was able to see the contact from the onboard. And it was a really interesting move, because normally a GT car, if you get passed by a prototype in turn 17, you wouldn't try to, get up the inside of them again on corner exit. I found that quite interesting, to be honest. I don't know if Scott ran wider than he had expected to. Because to me, I'd have to go back and look at it again, honestly, because I don't think I've seen it since I got home. I only had seen it right as it happened on that TV screen, but it looked to me like the 25 almost washed out towards him. I didn't know the 01 was actually planning on pitting at the time. But yeah, certainly 2 races of bad luck for that 01 team. At Daytona, they had the tire issues when they were in a very likely position to win the race with 10 minutes to go. And Sebring, final stint, they run into another set of problems. So hopefully they can get a nice turnaround for themselves, because they've been overall probably the strongest team in the first 2 races, but only finished 5th at Sebring. Let's hop it on to LMP2, if I may. The PR1 Matthias in number 52 was driven by Ben Keating, Mikael Jensen, and forgetting the last driver's name. I'm doing terrible at this. I'll pull that up, though. One overall, not overall, one in the LMP2 class. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull those driver names, so I'm sorry to that third driver. And then the Aero Motorsports, Orica, obviously, again, the number 18 car finished 2nd in LMP2, only 2.5 seconds back, so not a bad result in LMP2. Usually LMP2 and LMP3 end up sort of being sleeper classes in IMSA. So 2.5 seconds certainly isn't a bad result there. And then the Tower Motorsports number 8 car finishing 3rd. The probably biggest talking point from LMP2 was that 8 car, right? The car that ended up going for a nice ride.
Yeah, I would say so.
So they went for that pretty massive crash at the exit of turn number 1, where if you hadn't seen it, they had basically gotten up into the air and started flipping over. Still finished on the podium, though, so props to them, I guess. Granted, they were, see if I can get a lap count, quite a few laps down. The top 2 cars were 344 laps, and Tower was 266 laps at the finish. LMP3, 54 car Autosport car won in that class.
Well, didn't they get lucky that the Askew car broke?
Yes, I believe.
Do you remember there was a point in the race when the Askew car broke, but then they came back. They came back good enough to do burnouts at the end of the race, which is interesting.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm unable to really get a word to you on that, because honestly, I'm not sure. I was there and I hadn't seen.
LMP3 was surprisingly pretty good this round. It wasn't the laughing stock it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I can notice the top 3 were 2.6 seconds behind for second place and only 3.2 for third place. So top 3 blanketed by about 3 seconds is almost as close as it was in DPI. But Riley Motorsports finishing out the podium in that class, 2nd and 3rd place for the number 91 and 74 Ligier. So it was an all Ligier sweep in LMP3. The number 7 47 Motorsports Duquesne finished 4th. Sorry. And GTLM, another surprise winner. You want to talk about the 5 car being a surprise winner? How about the number 79 WeatherTech Racing Porsche? GTLM was really just a survival race, wasn't it? When we get to the end of that one.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you could even be surprised that the 79 made it through all those shenanigans, but Cooper McNeil, Mathieu Jaminet, and Matty Campbell pulling off their first win for that team in GTLM. It's only their second race, and obviously Daytona was a disaster for that team. They were the ones who crashed before they even made it to the start-finish line on lap 1. So they pulled off the win. Now, how they got there is what we're going to talk about now. The number 3 car in the 25 made contact. Was it exiting the hairpin?
Yes.
They made contact? Okay. At that point of the race, I was sitting over in turn 17. Basically just had timing pulled up on my phone, which that's one thing I can jump in with right here. If you ever go to Sebring, and I don't know if this is like an AT&T specific thing, but oh man, it's like the coverage is very spotty there. Like you'll be on one part of the track and you can get nothing. I'm sure it was just coincidental, but for me, the higher up I was able to get, the better coverage I was able to get. So in turn 17, they have that nice hill next to the bridge. I was sitting at the top of that hill trying to get, just a view of the cars going onto the front straightaway. And I was finally able to pull up the timing there. And initially, it showed the 25 BMW like stopped on track. I had the track map pulled up and thought, okay, well, this is a surefire win for the 3 car. Sure enough, that was just a timing loop glitch. They come around. We saw the 25 car come under the bridge, and we're like, all right, well, 25 is there, so that's obviously a glitch. And then we're like, wait, but where's the 3 car? And then bottom of the screen shows 25 car had a drive-through penalty for contact with the 3. And so pretty much right then and there, we're like, all right, well, Cooper McNeil's team, WeatherTech, is going to win this race, which was quite surprising because they definitely weren't the fastest cars out there that day. I thought it was going to be another Corvette when BMW sort of flexed their muscle at the end, and the 79 was kind of hanging behind all of them. The 4 car, the second Corvette, ended up having a misfire from the very start, which, when you're there in person, it sounded kind of cool, but certainly didn't help them performance-wise. They finished 4 laps down. 25 BMW, I noticed, was kind of getting in the way of a lot of people that race. They got into the scramble with the 01, like I had mentioned, and then the 3 car, and there's certainly some verbal disagreements, I'd say, on social media that you can find between drivers of that car and drivers of certain other cars. So, but hey, guess what? You're not even going to see them next round. So, if you're not a big fan of what was going on with the BMW in that race, well, next race they're not going to be there, and it's unfortunately only going to be the WeatherTech Racing Porsche and the 2 Corvettes because, as you may remember, BMW is only an endurance team this season. Finally, GTD, and then I'll give you a chance to talk, Kyle. The FAF Motorsports Porsche, so Porsche won GTLM and Porsche won GTD. FAF won the GTD class, followed by another Porsche, the Wright Motorsports entry, the number 16, and the Heart of Racing Aston Martin finished 3rd, number 23 car. And GTD, again, only 2.1 seconds at the line, or at the finish, I should say. Now, I guess the only thing I can say from being at the track is, wow, that DPI battle was just really impressive. It looked like it was never going to end. I think this was around sunset time. We were making our way down to turn 7, or not turn 17. We were making our way down to the hairpin, which had turned 9, I believe. Trying to get some sunset shots there. And they have that bridge, not the one right next to the hairpin, but the one before that on the beginning of the straightaway. We were walking over that bridge, and I said, hang on, let's just stop for a second. And they have this little gap in the bridge, and you could just see, and this wasn't like right after a restart or anything. This was, a good few laps into a run. You could just see the top 5 entries in DPI, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, just a little bit behind. And it was really impressive for me, to say the least. When you're 9 laps into a 12-hour race and you have absolutely no idea who's going to win overall, I mean, it was a real change of pace from what we saw around 10 years ago. And nothing to discredit that, because that's what I would call the golden era of sports car racing in America, when you had the Audis and the Peugeots fighting for basically what was the precursor to Le Mans, but back then you would have multiple laps as the gap at the finish. To see the top 5 all in a line like that, like literally a line, was something really cool. Kyle,
Yeah,
do
it
you?
was
All right.
it was pretty insane. The end of the race, even the Shank car was into it, and then just seeing Kamui at the end of the race, and at that point you already knew that the team had drive time infraction, and they were wherever they finished, they were going to get DQ'd, and just how aggressive he still was pretty entertaining. Um, Honestly, I think because the thing about their drive time was they missed drive time by 50 seconds when
Right.
Jimmy got out and Pagenaud went 50 seconds. If they just would have pitted a lap earlier and changed drivers, they would have not had to worry about these issues. But the rules are rules, and I, I'm just wondering, did anyone tell Kamui at the end? Like, did anyone tell him, or was he just going off? I don't. It was so entertaining to watch. I mean, really, to see the JDC car and their pace. I mean, pretty much you had every DPI up there except for the 31 and the 01, which they obviously had issues, which they were leading early in the day. So it's like, at this point, you can pretty much say that every DPI in the field has a chance always, and that's pretty crazy. We're already 2 races in, 2 crazy races, and I just can't wait to see what the rest, what we have in store for the rest of the season.
Tell you what about that 48 car. I didn't actually realize until after the race that they were disqualified.
Oh yeah.
I thought I had heard somewhere at the track that they had a time penalty. So I thought, okay, well maybe they can salvage like they should be able to get a top 5 out of this because of the issues that the 01 car had and the 31 car. But no, I didn't realize they were actually disqualified until quite a bit after the race. And then I guess the final note I can say on Sebring is, if you're a fan of JDC Miller Motorsports, just have me go to the race, because you may remember earlier in the episode I said the last IMSA prototype race I went to, actually the only IMSA prototype race I went to post-merger, was 2018 Watkins Glen, and try to remember who won that race. Oh yeah, it was the Gainsco liveried JDC car. So maybe I'm their good luck charm. I don't know. We'll have to see, because I think my next race should probably be Watkins Glen again. So I'm not superstitious or anything, but let's see how that goes. Anyways, moving on from Sebring, Kyle, I believe you had something that you wanted to talk about here.
Well, we got some news first. We got some news.
Okay,
There's
so you're
some
going to
news.
save this for the end, huh?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about LMDH, the latest rumors from that. I saw an article on Sportscar 365. John Daggies was saying that BMW, it looks like BMW's talks with regards to LMDH may have ramped up, which would certainly be very welcome. The more LMDH interest that we have, the better, obviously. It does bring up some questions on the future of GT racing at IMSA, which there is another story that we can talk about with regards to that in a few minutes here. But I also saw that Rahal Letterman, or Bobby Rahal more specifically, was interested in trying to race in the LMDH class with BMW. I believe he's sort of like maybe nudging BMW along, saying like, come on, if you're in, I'm in. But BMW has it in quotes, they are carefully looking at the global platform. So nothing too much more than we've heard before, but at least we now know that they're still ongoing evaluation for that class in the future. So we might potentially see BMW announce an LMDH program for the future. I had actually seen something else.
The sad thing from BMW this weekend was, like, I think we all know, everyone knows because of GTD Pro, but like, they officially said it. They said the thing. The BMW M8 after Petite is rest in peace.
Right.
They have no plans
Right.
anywhere. Which obviously we knew that. But there was still some sort of hope that maybe they'd just say, hey, screw it, take it to Le Mans because it's still legal there. But we got the confirmation. They're done. It's sad.
Well, I mean, BMW completely axed their World Endurance Championship stuff.
Sad.
Yeah, which I thought was very disappointing. when they announced the M8 program, well, the first year for that car is what, 2017? Or no, first year was 2018 actually, so it wasn't even that far back. It was only 3
Yeah, it
years
had a
ago.
short run with a lot of success.
I thought that was sort of a resurgence of BMW's presence in GTE racing with their full-time World Endurance Championship season alongside the alongside IMSA. You got to remember that BMW from 2012, I want to say, up until 2017. Well, 2018 would have been their first year back. So from 2012 to 2017, I believe, there was no BMW at Le Mans. So
Yeah.
I really had hope for them coming back, but we'll have to see what they end up talking about with LMDH. Maybe if they can pull off something on that front, then maybe you close one door, you open another. But I had seen something else. Again, this is only a rumor that there are potentially 3 manufacturers who are pretty close to confirming LMDH programs. Now, I can't really speculate anymore on that. I can't even say like who, because I don't know. That's why I can't tell you. It's because I don't know. But I had heard that there are, 1 to 3 manufacturers that may be close to announcing an LMDH program. And you got to wonder if these would be first-year programs. I'd think if they're announcing it this early, then it's possible, because the LMDH initial season will be 2023, at least on the state side. You got to think of some of the manufacturers that haven't committed yet that we thought were likely. Cadillac is certainly up there. BMW has been ongoing with talks still. I saw somebody in the chat just bring up Ford. Yeah, they could be a potential as well. I've kept bringing up their name with the Multimatic relationship. Now, the interesting thing with Multimatic is that, again, this is not confirmed yet, but I have seen people pretty confident that Multimatic will be partnering with both Audi and Porsche for their LMDH programs. I think a lot of people thought that Audi might be siding with Dallara. Dallara had a pretty strong relationship with Audi with the LMP1 cars. They built the majority of those LMP1 cars, starting with the R8. So perhaps some changing of the tides there. If Multimatic ends up partnering with Porsche and Audi, then
Audi Team Yost.
Well, I kind of hope Yost
Returns.
ends up back, but yeah, that would be.
Could you imagine?
That would be quite something. But that would make me question the future with Multimatic and Ford potentially having a DPI program. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But might Ford try to look with like Ganassi? That's completely speculation, but
Yeah.
I think Ganassi entering DPI at this stage of the game, because Ganassi is a team entering DPI. I would have expected them to enter either the first season or when Penske entered, which was the second season. And
Well, they did it really quick too.
yeah,
That was, I mean, if you think about it, we're all just kind of going about it as normal. And what's funny is last year, I think all year everyone just kind of knew, or I mean, even since Ganassi left, everyone just knew, at some point they're going to be back. It's no big deal. And then I think at the end of last year, everyone just knew that this year it was going to happen. And everything I've heard about the Ganassi deal is how quickly they just kind of did it. How
Right.
quickly they just kind of got the cars and got the team assembled and let's go to Daytona. It's such a weird thing if you think about it, really.
Well, of course, that's
It's
the
like-
old Juncos chassis as well. They pretty much took all the assets
Yeah.
from the Juncos team.
It's just like we knew this was happening for a long time, yet everyone just keeps saying how quickly they got this together, and then just makes you wonder. It's like you guys knew you were doing this for months and months and months, and then you decide in December, it's like, hey, we got time for this. Let's do it.
But
Kinda
I
weird.
wouldn't know. I completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, okay. I don't know why Ganassi would have been interested in a DPI program at this stage in the game. Like I had said, there has to be something
It
behind
has
that.
to be a manufacturer.
Because DPI, by the time Ganassi had committed to DPI, DPI already had its replacement announced. So
Hmm
if I was a team like Chip Ganassi Racing, am I going to go into a class and invest in it knowing that it's going to be no more in a few years and then just pull the plug in the program and say, well, that was fun? That doesn't seem like something that he would do to me. I'm sure he's heavily interested in LMDH, if I had to say. Which is weird because I haven't heard anything specific on that front. I haven't heard, Chip, as far as I know, hasn't said, yeah, I want to run LMDH out, blatantly. And if he had, there's no sort of hint as to who he may want to run with as a manufacturer. I think the only manufacturer ties that people can think of right now is everybody seems so keen on Penske and Porsche making a return, which, sure, it lines up. Penske wants to return to Le Mans, or not return to Le Mans. Penske wants to go to Le Mans, period. And Porsche is returning with LMDH. So I think that lines up pretty well, but nobody has been able to connect Ganassi to anything quite yet. So we'll have to wait and see, but I would keep your eyes on it because to me, there's no reason Ganassi would have joined DPI at this stage of the game if they didn't have any future plans.
There's no way they would just join for a couple, like a season or two, and then just say,
right,
just dip. Unless they're doing it to try and gauge interest in a manufacturer because they want to do LMDH, but they don't have anything lined up. It's either or, because there is a path that makes sense to where they're not really gaining any interest from manufacturers to run their LMDH program. So then they just kind of put it out there and run a DPI and say, hey, we have experience doing this for the last couple seasons in a prototype.
Right. Anyway, so at the beginning of all that, we were talking about BMW. They're interested in LMDH. Well, they're also apparently committed to working on a GTD Pro program, which is certainly positive news. Now, we have news on the opposite side of that front, which is Corvette Racing has come out and said, yeah, we're not going to be able to have a GT3 spec car ready for
I'm
next
excited
season.
to talk about this.
And when that announcement was made that the IMSA was going to be going to a GT3 Pro GT class, I had said in that video that I made about it, I probably said it in the podcast as well, there's no way in hell that IMSA is going to make this switch knowing that they're going to lose Corvette. If I had to guess, let's say you have Audi and BMW and Porsche and Lamborghini and McLaren and Lexus. You have all those 6 manufacturers and a couple more all in a pool. And then you have Corvette on the other side. I think that Corvette Racing, in terms of IMSA, in terms of what IMSA knows is their target demographic and how popular Corvette Racing is in that series, I think that one team, Corvette Racing, would hold as much weight or even more than the 6 that I just listed.
Yeah.
Which is where I've stood since the start. And that brought up questions on its own, such as if Corvette were to make a GT3 spec car, well, then would they be going to Le Mans? Would they hang the C8R GTE car around just to race at Le Mans, or would they run a couple WEC races with it? Well, now we're starting to get some answers from that. Because Corvette Racing, the head of the program, has outright said, we're not going to be able to do this next year because GT3, I think it's 20. You need 20 customer cars.
You need to build 20 customer cars in 2 seasons. So not just that you need to build a GT3 car, it's that you also need to be equipped to build customer cars. Like you have to. That's the regulation. And
let's remember that Corvette Racing is not, those cars are not assembled by Chevrolet. They are assembled by Pratt & Miller, who is largely a government defense contractor, but they also happen to have a race team with Corvette Racing.
So much.
And they developed the Camaro GT4 as well. In fact, if you are a fan of IndyCar with the Aero Kit era, they actually designed the Chevrolet IndyCar Aero Kits as well. So they're not really capable of meeting that 20 customer car requirement alongside their factory program in 2 years, from what I've heard, at least right now. So now the questions are, okay, IMSA, guarantee you, is going to want to keep Corvette.
For sure.
They almost don't have an option. I have long held the mantra that IMSA is well, let's think of like a fair number here. Let's say IMSA is 35% IMSA fans and 65% Corvette fans.
And let me tell you, Chris isn't some like Corvette fanboy either. Like he's just as an IMSA fan, whether you love or hate Corvette, like these are just things you know?
Well, yeah. And I can tell you firsthand after going to Sebring that, yeah, how many people do you see there that are, you know, you have people there that are Corvette fans. And there's, that's certainly not a problem. If that's why you want to attend the races and that's why you want to, show your support and that's why you're there, then power to you. That's no problem at all. But that is the truth of it, that you will have a almost majority of the audience, I want to say, who is there because they are fans of Corvette racing and they are fans of the Corvette C8R. And they're fans of the drivers in that team specifically.
Jordan Taylor, biggest driver in IMSA.
So, you can try asking some of those people in that category to name 5 other teams and they might not be able to do it. So, again, nothing to discredit that, but that is what I've noticed as the truth. It happens with Corvette racing more than any other team in IMSA right now. So, IMSA almost can't afford to lose them because their ticket sales and their viewership on TV would, if it doesn't plummet, it would at least decline. I think it's very fair to say it would at least decline. Now, IMSA has made exceptions in the past. They made exceptions with BMW in the Z4 and M6 era. The BMW Z4 and the M6 were not GTE homologated cars, meaning that they did not go through the ACO, and they were not ACO homologated GTE cars. They were not eligible to race at Le Mans. That's why you didn't see the Z4 at Le Mans ever, and that's why you never saw the M6 at Le Mans. Now, you saw it in IMSA because basically what BMW and Rahal Letterman did is they took the GT3 car and they sort of built it to GTE spec, per se, where they added the diffuser for more downforce and they sort of reshaped some of the aero work to make it more similar to a GTE car. But that, at the end of the day, that was not a ground-up GTE car, and it wasn't even GTE homologated. So if I had to guess right now, I would say that IMSA might be evaluating doing the same thing for Corvette, where you have a GTE car, and let's see if we can make that similar-ish enough where you can at least balance it to the other GT3 cars. Now, Corvette Racing has come out and said, well, yeah, but we're not really going to be able to do that because we designed this car as a GTE car. We designed it to have the amount of downforce it was going to have under GTE regulations. And if we go to GT3, it's just not going to be that efficient.
Corvette Racing's also a team where they're not just going to, throw something on just to do it, just so they can race. They're going to build a race-winning car. If they can't, they're not going to do it. Why would they waste their time?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have seen, multiple discussions on that front saying, where is this going to leave Corvette? The other thing that Corvette has sort of proposed, or sort of just tossed the idea around, is, well, maybe we'll run the entire World Endurance Championship season for
I took that as more of a
2022.
threat. I took that as a threat to IMSA. Is what I took that as. Because, so I think everyone kind of, excuse me, I think everyone at this point kind of feels like IMSA is going to give Corvette a pass to kind of reshape their current car for next season at least. But that just like if they go ahead and build a GT3 program, because Corvette hasn't announced for sure they're going to do that yet. So what I took that as is they flat out said if they did say this, because hats off to John Daggies of Sports Car 365. The article he wrote on this was just laid it out perfect, said it just all the information. It's just wonderful. But they basically said flat out that if they don't get special permission from IMSA to do this, they're going to go run the WEC season. They're going to go run WEC. That's what they're going to do. And it's what I was kind of wondering why they were going and doing all the, like they're going to be at Spa now. What's the other race? They're doing 2 WEC races this season. They're doing Portimao and Spa. I mean, this is where I will kind of criticize IMSA a little bit. The fact that they announced, I think it's crazy that they went ahead and announced GTD Pro that it was happening, and they went ahead and going through the regulations without for sure knowing that they had Corvette. Because what I thought initially when GT Pro was announced, I think everyone kind of thought this was that, oh, for sure we'll get Corvette. They haven't said anything, but like, yeah, they have to like know that Corvette's in if they announce this. Heck yeah, but they didn't, which I think is just crazy, and I don't think it's right. I don't think that's the right move at this point. And they also stated that they another thing you got to keep in mind is GM doesn't even have their LMDH future plans yet, and just yeah, possibly your biggest manufacturer is not in this class yet that you just announced. GM doesn't know what they're doing in LMDH. I mean, the rules aren't even finalized, so how they don't know what they're going to jump into yet, what they're going to do. I mean, it's a mess on that front. And by the way, BMW even said, this is interesting, that they actually are for allowing Corvette to have a kind of a waive next season,
Right.
for their regulation. So, I
Well,
mean, it's just, I'll criticize IMSA on that.
here's where I stand on this, and this is only my opinion, but as a fan of this series and somebody who's concerned about the health of all the classes in the series, I think going to GTD Pro in a GT3 based class was the right move.
Yeah.
And I'll stand by that because we have interest from BMW right now, which, BMW is the first one to come out and outright say, yes, we're planning on doing this. But you have to imagine that manufacturer interest among the board is pretty strong. When you open the gates to GT3, you're opening the gates to Audi, BMW, Porsche, Lexus, Mercedes, Acura, Ferrari. I'm forgetting some.
Not to mention all the customer teams from SRO and
Of course, yeah.
all of it that can go and run a,
Right.
and then all these customer teams can also go and join up and run the pro class, which is another incentive.
So as somebody who's a fan of the series as a whole and concerned about the health, like I had said, I think that that's the right move. Now, my hope is that IMSA only made that decision pretty much getting near confirmation that some of these manufacturers and some of these teams would be signing on to do it. Because one thing I will say about GT3 racing is that GT3 racing in the United States has never been as strong as it has been in Europe or Asia. You don't need to look far to notice this. You can look at the Spa 24 hours. You can look at the Nürburgring 24 hours. You can look at the Blancpain, not Blancpain anymore, the GT World Challenge over in Europe. You can look at ADAC GT Masters. You can look at DTM now if you want as well. They have a huge amount of interest in GT3 racing. And not only that, but they also have British GT is another series I can throw on that list. But they also have a handful of factory supported efforts over there. If you look at the Spa 24, that has a ton of factory entries. It has factory entries from Porsche, BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Honda, I believe, is a factory team, or at least they have been in the past. McLaren as well, I believe. Ferrari. Now, over stateside, you can look at some of the GT3 races that we've had, which, by the way, are in the same championship. You can look at the GT World Challenge. Not the GT World Challenge, the Intercontinental GT Challenge, which features the Kyalami race. They have the Bathurst 12 hours. They have the Spa 24, and they have the Indianapolis 8 hours. Formerly, that race was at Laguna Seca. But Laguna Seca has always been probably the least strong race on that calendar in terms of car counts. And the reason why is simple. All of those teams, or the majority of those teams, are from Europe. So you're going to get more interest in the Spa 24. And it's going to be easier for them to bring their cars to Kyalami. And then I think that Bathurst is just a bigger race that manufacturers want to bring
It's
their
also
entries to.
ran by supercars.
Well, that too, yes. But I have been a little bit concerned about the overall performance of GT3 racing on the factory side in the United States. Every single time they've had the Intercontinental GT races here, they've always been the low light of the championship, I'd say, in terms of entries. So I'm hoping on the IMSA front that that can change and we can get teams that are interested in doing factory racing, because that's what this has to be. You know, you can get a couple of privateers in this class if you want with all pro lineups, but at the end of the day, the money's coming from factory entries, and GT3 racing was not designed to be fully factory programs like GTE was. So, you know, it's sort of like putting a square block into a circular hole. You're not really, putting the right puzzle or the right piece into the puzzle here. But I remain optimistic. I'm hoping for the best for the future, and I am hoping that Corvette can find a way into that class, because in an ideal scenario, I hope Corvette would be able to make a proper GT3 car within maybe 2 years of the introduction of that class. They were sort of blindsided, I think, by this announcement, because we must remember that this announcement came pretty late. The whole GT3 Pro class for IMSA, or GTD Pro, sorry, was a surprise announcement to many people. It wasn't like this was heavily rumored for months and then they sort of made it official. Like, I remember when that announcement came out, that was surprising. So
And
that leads me to,
the fact that even Corvette was blindsided by it though,
right.
because that's ultimately what it sounds like, and it's
Mm-hmm.
the fact he didn't have Corvette in on it, and they're kind of scrambling to what they're going to be able to do. I'll give IMSA. I'm going to be hard on IMSA for that one. That's peculiar to say the least. But
Right.
I do feel like they'll figure something out. Like again, I mean, at this point, knock on wood, save this soundbite for when it doesn't happen and they go WEC racing. But like, I think for sure we'll have Corvette still in IMSA. They just can't afford to lose them.
Well,
Now,
well,
I
them
love IMSA, but like if they did go WEC racing, that wouldn't be a terrible thing. But like, still,
well, them racing in the WEC has never been a sort of threat to IMSA. They've never run that championship to say, "Hey, IMSA, like if you don't, bow down to our expectations and our hopes, then we're just
still
going to jump
no.
ship." But it still isn't about that, as far as I know. The reason why I think they're doing that is to, I feel like the ACO and the FIA is putting a little bit of pressure on them to run those races, to be like, hey,
Well, they said it.
well, yes, it's like, we're gonna give you an invite to Le Mans if you come and run a couple of
No,
our
well, like
races. That's why they've
Corvette
done that.
said it. They said
Yeah.
if we can't get something worked out with them, so we're
Well,
going
yeah.
racing in the
So
WEC.
so that's a threat, but
I
not
took
them.
that as a threat, which I thought if your biggest manufacturer is throwing you a threat, then what are you doing?
So Blackman614 said GM loses Cadillac branded prototype and it becomes a Corvette LMDH. Now I've actually seen more speculation on that than I would have expected, because Corvette, to me, I never could have seen them in the LMDH class or in DPI. Surely they had the DP program, which even I thought that was a little bit weird on its own. But is it a possibility, do you think, Kyle, that Corvette says, "All right, we're done with this," and Corvette racing as we know it ends up becoming an LMDH team?
I think ultimately that just comes down to what GM decides and what they're going to do with their LMDH program. I mean, maybe GM decides that they instead of a Cadillac LMDH, they tell Corvette, since GT is such a mess and they are trying to figure things out, maybe it'd just be easier to go run LMDH. And then the other thing with LMDH, and this is actually kind of interesting, is if what Corvette wants to do, like, because Corvette wants to run Le Mans, they wouldn't. I don't think, because it is kind of weird to me with GTD Pro, and kind of the downside is if you can't run IMSA full time and also run that same car at Le Mans, I think that kind of turns down Corvette a little bit. So it would kind of make sense in a way if Corvette Racing went to and became GM's LMDH program, because then they could take that exact same car that they're running in IMSA to Le Mans. So you'd still keep that. It makes a little bit more sense to me, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna have to wait on that story because right now it's a bunch of dead ends, and quite a few of them aren't good dead ends. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Any news from the IndyCar front, Kyle? Sure, we have something because it's been about a week and a half since we've had an episode.
Well, Rocket Mortgage signed on to sponsor Sebastian Bourdais for the entire season, primary sponsor. So AJ Foyt, the 14 car, actually does have a full-time sponsor now, which is neat. You'd love to see that. Rocket was obviously the sponsor of Williams, and then it wasn't. So, and then also we got some Indy 500 entry news, because Racer did one of those articles where they went through the whole field. I believe we're finally up to like a 30. We're up to 33. The rumor kind of has like we could have like I think the highest number is like 35 or 36 I've seen that we could get with there. So we could get a big entry fall. We could get a big entry list.
So that article states 31 confirmed. So
confirmed, yeah. But some of the rumors, they talked about Oliver Askew is in talks right now to run a sixth Andretti car, which that obviously all comes down to funding, which most of these do. And then Ryan Reinbold announced, and Carlin confirmed that they're going to run one car. Obviously, that's not that surprising for Carlin, because it kind of seems like they could run two cars if they wanted to, but they confirmed that they're only going to do one. And Ryan Reinbold, who have ran two since 2018, they said they're only going to run one this year, which is interesting. I'm guessing that one's going to be Karam, unless they for some reason dropped Karam and they're just going to run Hildebrand. I don't know. I would guess it would be Karam running that car. It seems like they've run, because they've ran him in extra races outside the 500 and not Hildebrand. It's kind of what I'd go off of. But yeah, some extra things. And them downsizing, it's one of those deals where you lose one, you gain one, because then we're getting Peretta and another Aero McLaren entry, because Honda and Chevy still, build the same amount of engines as each other. So it's like if Ryan Reinbold and Carlin lose an entry, then that just means that engine's going to another team. And Foyt has also been rumored to run a fourth car. Not sure who the driver of that would be, but that's a thing kind of turning up. And with them gaining a new sponsor, so they have another car that's funded, so it would be likely to me that they'd be able to add another entry.
Can I jump back while you're on AJ Foyt here?
Yeah.
Because I just remembered like 2 minutes ago, and I kind of just let it slip, or let you slide with it, but then I was like, wait, no, he's wrong. You said Rocket Mortgage has signed on for Bourdais?
Rocket, not the mortgage. Yeah.
As in Rocket, the ex-Williams sponsor, that one. The reason
I went straight to Rocket Mortgage is I live in Ohio, and so the Cavs believe it's Rocket Mortgage. I get them confused. I do that a lot.
Sure. Yep. Anyway, were you in the middle of a point? Sorry, I just had to point that out to you because I just didn't want somebody to call us out on that.
I just got one more thing. So in the last bit of news, this is on the upside. Texas talked about how they're actually getting rid of the PJ1 for the race in May, which is really nice. They said at night they haven't been using chemicals to take it off because that'll ruin the surface supposedly. So they've just been kind of like brushing it at night under the cooler air, trying to get the PJ1 off of it, which was a problem last year and made the race one lane and kind of boring. So if the PJ1's gone this year, we could get multi-groove racing at Texas, and I think a lot of people won't be dreading that double header as much as we already are, because I'll tell you I am, if it's anything like last year. 2 boring Texas races. Yikes. But, yeah. I believe this weekend, so I believe I'm still going to this April 8th. There's a test at IMS at the Speedway. But our good friend David Land's actually in Indy right now for some on-track action. not just doing other things. I believe he is there for on-track action as well. So I don't know if the test date moved or if there's two test dates, but I'm pretty sure I'll be at least one. But what I believe they're doing there is also testing new floors for the oval kit. So overall, maybe the super speedway racing will get better this year, and then at the very least, with no PJ1, the Texas race should be better.
Well, that's good. Because last year was like
Rough.
almost downright dangerous having that
Yeah,
PJ1. Remember we were watching that
caused
race?
more spins.
We were watching that race and we were like, oh, don't get up there. You're just waiting for an accident to happen. But yeah, I think that's an overall positive. I would hope NASCAR never put it back because
Yeah.
NASCAR races at Texas are always mediocre regardless.
Next we need to get it off Gateway, which is kind of sad because I don't think they. Because what's stupid is they run the NASCAR Truck Series race in the morning of the Gateway race.
Yeah.
So, are they going to get rid of the PJ1 for that? Probably not, because NASCAR runs there that weekend, which it doesn't even help the truck race. It's pretty dumb. I don't like that at all. And it just makes the IndyCar race boring because you can't gain momentum right in the top. You got to stick to the bottom. It drove me crazy this year how boring Gateway was, and knowing how well that track actually races.
Oh, sorry, you caught me mid-yawn. You also had one more thing that you wanted to talk about, because while we're on IndyCar, I'll let you get on with that. And then I do want to preview the Formula One season, because Formula One is starting this weekend. So,
Right. So I saw something on Twitter yesterday that made me like, if you would have been talking to me when I read that, you wouldn't have understood a word I said because I would be talking in cursive. It was ridiculous how I'm still speechless kind of on the matter. But recently, our buddy David put on Twitter that one of the underrated people in IndyCar in the mid 2000s was Randy Menard. If you don't know Randy Menard, I believe he was the president. He was in whatever the CEO, whatever position Mark Miles is in now. Basically, I'm pretty sure
IndyCar.
he was the guy before Mark Miles. He was. I'm gonna try and look up as I'm talking the year he started, but Randy Menard was the president of IndyCar until 2012. And Randy Menard, however you feel about him in IndyCar, is really controversial for a few reasons. The first, and it usually comes to everyone's mind right away, is obviously Las Vegas 2011. A lot of people pin that on Randy, and I don't think you can pin all of that on Randy. But yeah, that's just the first thing everyone kind of thinks of and kind of blames him for and gives him a lot of crap for. But he said that he was one of the most underappreciated people throughout the mid 2000s because of the things he did. And someone by the name of NASCAR Man on Twitter, who is very knowledgeable of the history of auto racing as a whole, not just NASCAR, as you might guess by his name, NASCAR Man, but he basically showed a link to an interview that Randy did like a week ago, like very recent. That if you went to the 45-minute mark, it was like 3 or 4 minutes of him talking about IndyCar, and it's a few. As an IndyCar fan, it's honestly a few hard minutes to watch. But basically, he talked about how when he joined IndyCar, the series was losing $30 million. Okay, he assumed the role in 2010. Not a long time, actually. So 2010 to 2012. So when Randy Menard came to the series in 2010, the series for a long time, for years, was losing $30 million a year. And he talked about how by the end of the first year, he had the series breaking even, which is impressive. That's very impressive. That gets overshadowed a lot. And so he also talked about how he was sent death threats after Vegas 2011, which is awful. And he also talked about in 2012 how he got fired. Now, so the way he got fired was So IndyCar has a tire contract with Firestone, a sole deal where Firestone is the sole tire provider, and that deal was coming to a close. And Continental Tire, I don't think the deal was coming to a close yet. I think they were still in contract till like another year or two, but it was getting there. And so Continental Tire came in and wanted to replace Firestone basically. And they offered IndyCar $36 million to become the sole tire provider. And so Randy was all on it because here's the big oof. Firestone was paying $500,000 at the time. So your tire provider at this point is paying $500,000, and you have another company that comes in and offers $36 million. And when you came into the sport, the series was losing $30 million a year, and you got it to breaking. Like you're at a point where you get this deal that you could finally be really, really swinging. And basically, for trying, he was gonna sign the deal. I believe he was gonna go with it, but he got a bunch of backlash from the drivers, the teams, and the board of directors. And ultimately, I don't think there's a pure like confirmation of this is why he got fired, but ultimately he was released, and they stuck with Firestone. Now Firestone since the number hasn't been stated, but they have increased their involvement as far as advertising, and I believe they're paying more at this point. But it's just yeah. When you just right away off the bat when you hear your tires provider is paying $500K and someone wants to come in and pay $36 million, and then the only person who was wanting to go ahead was Randy Menard, and everyone else around him said no. Now, don't get me wrong, Firestone's a great partner. They're great. The tires are safe. They're very great. The on-track product. Firestone rarely has issues, and obviously with IndyCar, Continental not having the experience with open wheel cars and just without the experience and data, switching tire providers would be a big deal, and doing it just based off getting paid more probably isn't the smartest thing. Now, granted, I'm saying this is in trusting that Continental would have came in with a plan, and it would have been a lot smarter than, hey, we'll give you money, let us build the tire, and just whatever. I would hope that if they're willing to come in and pay $36 million, that there would be a lot more that went into it, that to where they would be a great partner like Firestone was, or still is. It's never got signed, but I think it's crazy. It's just crazy to me how that I don't understand. Wow. It just, that number blows me away. It's insane. And obviously there was actually another time, and I do remember this being brought up. I don't know how I'm just now learning about this because this is just like a thing. But when the Firestone contract ended in 2018, Continental was getting pushed out of IMSA for Michelin, and Continental wanted to still, build tires for a racing series, and they wanted to replace Firestone in 2018. And it's also, to me, just bad business. I mean, it's bad business if Firestone then knows that they're not going to be replaced, even if another deal costs $35.5 million than what they're paying comes along. They just like that's just bad business to me, knowing that you're gonna that you're just not going to be replaced. Now, they did step up their involvement, but gosh, I mean, the least you can do is go to Firestone and use that as a tactic. Be like, hey, they want to pay us this much. What do you got? And just with all the back, I just don't think that was not done the right way. And Randy Menard is just like innocent, in my opinion. That was it's
Free
ridiculous.
Randy Bernard.
Everyone just gives him so much crap. And there's so many IndyCar fans that are so passionate about this topic, I've learned too. So like, you don't mess with the tires. And it's like, if you're getting paid $35.5 million more. You do. You think about it at least. And people are acting like that. Like, people need to. This is another thing I kind of noticed about IndyCars. People need to like realize this isn't a rich and flourishing series. I hope people understand that.
Not
I
a
hope
$30 million a year deficit. You're not.
exactly. Like, I hope people realize that this isn't like, and this is how kart goes down. This is how Champ Car goes down. You're breaking even or losing $30 million a year. Oh, we're fine. We're gonna keep going. No, you're not. And so then it also got my brain moving to where, well, we're not under the Holmans anymore. So hopefully a blunder like that won't happen next, contract that expires that's as important as a tire deal. Or hopefully Roger either has more cash, which he does, and hopefully he gets more cash from these contracts. It's just, man, it's frustrating. Man.
Okay, so let's go back. So this is like 2011, 2012 when
2012.
these discussions are going on. Okay, that's only
2012, yep.
That's only 4 years post merger.
Yep.
All right, and so the surprising thing to me is that 4 years post merger, everybody's like, all right, American open wheel racing is back on top. Or maybe not back on top, because by that point they were long surpassed by NASCAR. But they're back in a comfortable position. This is almost like the we're finally unified again. But then you have this underlying problem of losing $30 million a year that never really came to light. And what that makes me wonder is, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and I don't expect you to have an answer, but like, how much was that IZOD deal worth?
I can look it up.
Because,
in fact, I don't know. I feel like I've tried to look this up before.
Because pulling a series back from a $30 million a year loss, when the public is concerned that they're in a healthier spot than they were, 5 years earlier. And let's not forget that, like you had mentioned, money issues were that was the downfall of kart. Kart went bankrupt. So to me, if you're losing $30 million a year, and you're talking about, it's only been a 4 or 5 year period since Champ Car went bankrupt, and you're losing that much money per year, and you're considering this tire deal that's going to make you profit. Actually, it's not going to make you break even, it's going to make you profitable. To me, it's very surprising that they
and not just surprising they didn't go. Like, if they just didn't go with it, they fired the guy over this.
Right.
They fired him over this. I mean, Mark Miles hasn't done a bad job, but they fired this guy because he wanted to take a $30 million deal when your tire supplier is paying $500,000.
How much money do they have in excess then? Because if you're losing $30 million per season, that's an outrageous number to me. To be losing, that's not your expenses. That's how much you're losing. And that includes the money that you're pulling in from a TV deal, which, granted, their TV deal back then probably didn't make them that much money. Apparently their IZOD deal didn't make them that much money, which, I've heard in the past that IZOD wasn't as strong a partner as, say, Verizon was, or say NTT is now. But, if you're losing $30 million a year, how much are you actually pulling in? How much money are you actually pulling in per season?
So it was written by AutoWeek in November of 2009 that the IZOD deal was estimated between 15 and 20 million a year.
A year. Okay. How much was the Monster Energy NASCAR deal? Do you remember that?
I'm just looking stuff up at this point.
Because I'm trying to get context on how. Well, actually, no. Tell you what. See if you can find how much the NTT deal was worth, or if not NTT, then Verizon, because NASCAR is not really truly comparable.
Because I've seen the NTT number. Okay, so their IndyCar's asking price. I remember reading about this when they were looking for a title sponsor after Verizon wasn't happening anymore. Their asking price. Okay, so Verizon paid 10 million.
That's it?
A year. Yeah. Well, because the thing too is the IZOD deal that happened in 2009 was a 6-year deal. So that didn't go, and that lasted until 2013. It lasted half the contract. Because I don't. I mean, I don't even know if that's just like not. Because I don't. I feel like something happened to Izod as a whole. But Verizon. So just looking at the NTT, IndyCar's asking price was 30 million annually compared to the 10 million paid by Verizon. Uh, what's the? It could.
I mean, it's safe to say
Uh,
they didn't get asking price, but so the fact that they're even asking 30 million when Izod was paying how much? 15 per year? Is that what Izod was? Because I already forgot
what?
the number. How much
15
was
to 20.
15 to 20?
So I actually paid more than Verizon.
Huh. That's weird to me. I'd like to tell you what, we're gonna be doing an IndyCar preview episode in a couple of weeks. Good buddy of ours, Christopher DeHardy, might be joining us for that one. He is a journalist who's written for IndyCar and he's written for motorsport.com in the past. So perhaps we can have him on and discuss a little bit more about that then, because Kyle and I are a little bit uneducated, if you haven't been able to tell, when it comes to this stuff. We're Googling stuff on the spot.
When it comes to like 2012 insider stuff like this, you kind of have to, if you weren't like around it on the Reddit and on social media, like if you weren't in it in like 2012, 2011, then it just kind of just like it did like for me like yesterday, it just kind of flashes by you and then you finally hear about it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, geez, gosh. And so the other thing too is Randy Menard came from professional bull riding, and Mark Miles, I believe, came from.
It's
I'm gonna
tennis,
fact
wasn't
check
it?
this, but he came from tennis. Uh, so these guys, and I actually do want to. I want to actually listen to the entire interview that Randy Menard did because it was like an hour long. It was a full thing, and just going to the 45-minute mark and watching for about 5 minutes, I definitely want to listen to that whole thing and just hear more about it because he actually, I think, not only did he get fired, but he as a person was not really a car guy. Matter of fact, Mark Miles really isn't either. But like in this position, when you're dealing with the financials and the decision making, you don't really have to be, nor probably should you be. So, I mean, when you look at it from, I mean, so yeah, when you look at it from like changing the tire supplier and at the like core of it, where it's, what kind of tire will Continental bring compared to Firestone? Isn't this a risk? Since Firestone's done this so long, they know what they're doing. Why would we change tires? Obviously, a guy like Randy Menard or Mark Miles wouldn't exactly have the for sure like surefire answer like the teams and the drivers. So obviously, I think he didn't really get that aspect of it as much, and he was all more about making money and the job he was doing, and that rather than the racing and the actual on track stuff. Same way as Mark Miles. So there is that bit of. A lot of people don't like that about Randy Menard or even Mark Miles. A lot of people are hard on Mark Miles. But at the end of the day, these are the guys that need to help the series make money. Because if you haven't realized, people in motorsports who race aren't that smart when it comes to economics. So just the whole deal, man. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, final discussion for this episode. I want to talk briefly about F1 testing and the preview for the F1 season, which, again, as I said, starts this weekend. We weren't able to talk about this last week because we didn't have an episode last week. Sorry, college got in the way again. Actually, I think it was work for that time. Hello, Cole. Cole's joined us in the chat. So there are a couple notes to talk about. Mainly what I want to talk about here is Mercedes. Every single year, Mercedes is not necessarily the fastest in F1 testing. Now, they were fastest on the second day. Valtteri Bottas did a 1:30.289, which was 10th of a second faster than Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. Now, the thing that isn't quite as common to hear from the Mercedes camp is, issues. Usually people just accuse them of sandbagging and call it a day, and then we get to Australia and they're, business as usual. But Valtteri Bottas complained in the third day of testing that the car had a quote-unquote unforgiving rear end, but also said that it was understeering but also snappy, which to me sounds like understeer and oversteer. He said the issues eased a little bit in the middle of day 3, but to me that's quite interesting to hear, because usually Mercedes, you'd expect them to just be on top of their game and making minimalist increments from their previous year's cars. Right now, it sounds like Mercedes might be having some struggles. Lewis Hamilton also had a spin. I believe it was on day 2 of testing. I'd have to get a confirmation on that. It was either on the second day or the first day. Just seeing if I can pull that up right now. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton brought out a red flag for a spin at the beginning of the second day of testing. Now, fastest driver across all 3 days in the test was Max Verstappen for Red Bull. It was a 1:28.96. Followed by, surprisingly, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. Now, Tsunoda, that lap wasn't like officially official, because I believe I saw something. There was something to do with the DRS, I believe, where he was like, I can't remember honestly. I wish I had read more into that, but I do know that lap, in a race weekend sense, wouldn't have been official because of some loophole with DRS or something along those lines. Ferrari is another big talking point here, because obviously Ferrari last year was just an atrocity. They were a disaster. When you looked at their 2018 engine, their 2018 engine was pretty much the head of the field. At Monza in 2018, it was pretty dominant because of how much power it had in a straight line. Sure thing, that engine is illegal. In 2019, they're running a piece of shit. So, top speed was their biggest concern last season. It looks like that may have been rectified a little bit. Mattia Binotto said that certainly top speed isn't as much of an issue right now as it was last year. Looking at the timing sheets, Carlos Sainz was third on the third day of testing with a 1:29.6, so that's only 0.6 of a second off of Verstappen. Leclerc was 10th in that session, but again, we're looking at testing times. We're looking at a top 4 that consists of Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Ferrari, and Alfa Romeo. Take it as you will. We're not looking at the absolute best from these teams and drivers right now. So I'm hoping that Ferrari is a little bit more of a contender this year, because last season they were struggling to even get on the podium in most races. In fact, Vettel was struggling to even find himself inside the top 10 or top 5 quite a few weekends. Other notes, Aston Martin isn't quite as far up the field as I would have expected them to. Obviously, that was the Racing Point team from last season. Lance Stroll was 4th on the first day of testing, and Vettel was down in 13th. On the second day, Lance Stroll was 3rd, and Vettel was 16th. And on the final day, they were both at the tail end in 17th and 18th. Yeah, I don't really know if that's representative of anything, as I had said, but just something to note. Lewis Hamilton back to Mercedes, because I forgot to mention that they also had some gearbox issues. I think that was on the first day of testing when they had some gearbox problems. Lewis also said that he was struggling to string together fast sectors if it was a qualifying scenario. So we'll have to see what it looks like in a couple of weeks. Obviously, Bahrain is the opening round this season. They're not going to Australia until later in the season. usually they will run their preseason tests at a track that isn't the opening round of the season. So I'm sure some teams were maybe experimenting with some setups for the race in a couple of weeks. You're not going to get that many changes in terms of weather conditions over a 2-week, 3-week period. But yeah, I don't have that much else to discuss in terms of F1 testing. In terms of my predictions for the season, I still expect to see Mercedes on top.
Yeah.
Qualifying and the race for Bahrain. We've seen concerns like this in the past, and I feel like everybody gets their hopes up that, oh, maybe this is the year that Mercedes didn't do their homework quite as well as they usually do. But then first race of the season, that's always pretty much debunked. I don't expect anything out of the ordinary this season in terms of that. We'll have to wait and see. I could be wrong, but that's where I stand right now. Maybe they aren't going to be as capable as they thought they were going to be. Maybe they have to do a little bit more work right now. But yeah, strong outing for Red Bull during testing. We'll have to see how much they can put up a fight to Mercedes, because I still don't see Ferrari being the number 2 team this year. I think that while they may have improved their engine a little bit, I feel like last year they just fell too far behind to be the number 2 team again this early. So I would expect Red Bull to be quite far up in the championship. I've seen some people even putting Red Bull as a potential to win the season opener at Bahrain. I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but I do think that they're still going to be the number 2 team. And this is where I toss it over to Kyle. Any opinions on F1 testing? Tactics. Huh?
Yeah. I'm not going to, like you said, I'm not going to believe until I see it. All the teams are going to say, hey, we have a shot against Mercedes this year. That's cool. And then Mercedes is just going to win. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. There's no way. There's no way. And also, Ferrari is not going to, since it's basically, so there are like changes for this year versus last year, but like there wasn't a lot of change to really tell me otherwise. That whoever, like, I guarantee there'll be teams who improve their cars, and maybe Mercedes did get worse, but there's nothing that tells me after last season that Mercedes is going to go out there and struggle. I mean, sure, they'll have issues, but yeah, there's no way.
Other interesting things to note, looks like Williams may have picked up the pace a little bit. Last season, obviously, and the season before, where Williams is just ultimate nightmare. They're pretty much at the back of the field. Roy Nassani finished 14th on testing day 1. Interesting thing about Williams is that they only ran one of the cars for testing on all 3 of the days, as far as I can tell. Because on the second day of testing, it was Nicholas Latifi. He ended up finishing 7th, only 1.3 seconds off Bottas. And on the third and final day of testing, it was George Russell. So I guess each driver, from what I can see, got their own day to test the car. And Russell was actually even more impressive, finishing 6th in the timesheets, only 1.1 seconds behind Verstappen. And keep in mind, Verstappen on that final day was doing a 1:28.9, when the previous days the fastest time was a 1:30 on each day, a 1:30.6 on day 1 and a 1:30.2 on day 2. Right now, it looks like like Haas may be struggling to the level that Williams was in previous seasons. I know Haas has always kind of been back there with Williams at the tail end of the field, unfortunately. And it looks like, as of testing results show, that Williams may have pulled a slight advantage on Haas right now. So we'll have to see if that holds up, though, for the race, because, again, F1 testing is so hard to look at and really come to any definitive conclusions. First race, though, for F1 is this weekend at Bahrain. If you're in the United States, you can tune in on ESPN something. I don't know what network they're going to throw that on, but F1 TV is my platform of choice at this point, anyways. Because, as I've said in previous episodes where we talk about live streaming media in sports, or not in sports racing, but in motorsports in general, F1 TV is pretty much the benchmark. That's where you want to be. But that's sort of an aside. Anyways, I think that's going to be enough to wrap this episode up of the Rain Race Podcast. Sorry it was on a Wednesday this time. Monday, what was Monday? I can't remember. I think I was trying to finish up an assignment. And I'd also just gotten back from Sebring, and I was extremely tired. Got very little sleep that weekend. And also sorry for the time change. It was 9:15 tonight instead of 9 p.m. because of work. Simply because of that. I got out of work at 9 p.m. Anyway, perhaps for the future, we may move the time up a little bit to accommodate our European friends. But outside of that, we should be back next Monday at the regular time at 9 p.m. Eastern. And hope to catch you all then. For now, this has been another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope to catch you next week. Take care.